It's time for Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
We'll hear argument this morning in Case 16-111, Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Ms. Wagner?
This is Wretched Radio. Pretend that you get to be a fly on the wall of the Supreme Court, because you're about to be. We are going to listen to as much as we can, well, frankly, stomach of the perhaps biggest court case of 2017, which will ultimately be decided in 2018. Masterpiece Cakes. They bake bakery. There's a shocker. For a living in Colorado, two fellows who were going to get, they think, married, asked them to bake a wedding cake. This fellow, you should know, he in the past will sell a cake to anybody, but when it comes to his artistic expression, violating his conscience is not something that he is willing to do, and he has many times turned down people because of the messages they wanted him to write. I don't know, what do you call it when you write with frosting? To put onto a piece of cake. For his troubles and for his beliefs, he was, well, sued. And so now his case has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. And because I believe that this case is going to have as many implications as did Obergefell, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, we're going to listen to as much of this as we can take. And I think that you're going to be hearing several things that are worth your consideration. Number one, this is Pandora's box that is being opened up. If the state can determine what we can and what we cannot say, get ready for a complete Donnybrook. The Founding Fathers, they recognize this. It makes common sense, frankly. If people are going to be allowed to maintain religious beliefs and speak freely, some people are going to get annoyed. And so they realize that if we get involved in that, well, we're going to be having to show some favoritism to somebody. And that's the case, and I think that you are going to hear that. Once the Supreme Court judges start hacking away, asking questions of the defense, you're going to hear, wow, this is going to be a complete mess, which I think is the second thing that you are going to hear in this. The questions that are being asked, this to me, you be the judge in this. This is the Supreme Court. This is the way that they go about rendering decisions and verdicts. I hope that they do a whole lot more research than what simply happened in court. Prepare for what I think is going to be quite enlightening. We're going to listen to as much of this as we can, because the third thing that I hope we will hear are the basic arguments, for better or for worse, from both sides. Please note, when this case was presented to the Supreme Court, it was asked to be tried on two levels, freedom of religion and freedom of speech. They said no on the freedom of religion. Well, that's really what this is about. So they just decided to keep it to freedom of speech, which I don't think is helpful or good, because if you can make decisions about what people are going to speak, that impinges on freedom of religion. Nevertheless, it did get dragged in, sort of like a carcass. It got dragged into the house by a cat. It was talked about. You are going to hear the arguments from both sides so that we as Christians can know what the world is up to. What are they thinking? Let us begin with Ms. Wagner. I'll do my best to try to identify for you who is speaking, because it's the interruptions. They ask a question. They don't let the answer get. They're on to the next question.
It's a courtroom.
It shouldn't be. When you've got 9 different judges asking questions and there's no decorum, it becomes a bit of a hash.
Just 3 over and over and over and over again.
Say that again, Joey?
It's really just 3 judges asking questions over and over again.
Say that again, Joey?
It's really just...
Here we go.
So what I was saying was...
Get it. Got it.
Here we go. Here's the opening
I was
defense.
3 that...
Constantly we're nattering away. All right, we'll hear that, and it's the ones that we would expect that from. But in hearing them, which is good, because then we don't have to listen to this whole shebang because it's interminable, that we're going to know what the world is up to. Let's begin with the opening defense.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court, the First Amendment prohibits the government from forcing people to express messages that violate their religious convictions. Yet the Commission requires Mr. Phillips to do just that, ordering him to sketch, sculpt, and hand-paint cakes that celebrate a view of marriage in violation of his religious convictions.
Can I ask
What
you?
if it's an item off the shelf? That is, they don't commission.
She was making her opening remarks. They couldn't wait to get to her. Now, again, what if it's an item off the shelf? What if he has to make it? What if it has more than 7 ingredients? What if the frosting is white, but the person is black? I mean, this was just ridiculous.
A cake just for them, but they walk into the shop, they see a lovely cake, and they say, we'd like to purchase
Ginsburg.
it for the celebration of our marriage tonight. The Colorado law would prohibit that. Would you claim that you are entitled to an exception?
Absolutely not. The compelled speech doctrine is triggered by compelled speech, and in the context of a pre-made cake, that is not compelled speech.
Okay, as ridiculous as this is, here's the difference. They wrote a cake that says...
Justices again?
Yeah, I know it. They wrote a cake that says happy birthday. It's sitting on the shelf. They have to sell that, and they would sell that. If, however, they are asked to write a particular message, that's the case in point. Do you see what a muddled mess this becomes? It is indeed Pandora's box.
Phillips is happy to sell anything in his store, including...
Didn't he express himself when he made it?
Kennedy?
Yes, he did express himself when he made it, and the purpose for which he expressed it is important to the compelled speech doctrine and how it applies. But when
I'm sorry, he did refuse to sell.
Could I get the answer to the question? So if you agree that it's speech, then why can he not refuse to sell the cake that's in the window, according to Justice Ginsburg's hypothetical?
Well, in the context of if it's already been placed in the stream of commerce in a public accommodation setting, his speech has been completed. He intended to speak through that cake with the purpose of whatever it was when he created it.
Can I ask a stupid question?
Oh, well,
I know,
why
there
not?
are no stupid.
Not the
Let's
first
just
today.
pile of...
I could be a chief justice, or a justice. Now I forgot my stupid question.
Don't worry.
Are they ever going to let her finish her opening?
No,
her opening statement.
They don't. It's
Okay,
it's just
good.
a constant set of interruptions and scenarios. Now,
Missing the actual facts of the case, obviously.
yes, and we could dive into each one of these. I think the bigger point is when government gets involved in free speech, this is what must happen.
Contrast, though, when he has a different purpose and is expressing a message through a cake, it would render a different result.
Now, I should note, if he is left-handed and he's a Virgo who was born on the last date before becoming a Sagittarius, and then he decides that he likes
I'm
to...
sorry, didn't he refuse to sell cupcakes that he sells regularly to the public to some
Here we go.
same-sex couples who intended to marry?
That allegation was never involved in the complaint, the formal charges, the ALJ's decision.
But I
Your
thought,
Honor, please.
I'm a little bit surprised by what you're saying, because your brief seemed to suggest differently, that the couple was looking at his already pre-designed cakes that he appears to sell without any customization, and they sat down with him and he said, I don't supply cakes of any kind to gay couples. So I thought this cake was about his refusal to supply a cake for any wedding ceremony.
Justice Sotomayor, that's not how he responded to the couple. The couple came in and they requested a custom cake for their wedding. At that point, they brought in a folder with all kinds of designs they wanted to discuss and ended up purchasing a rainbow layered cake or received a free rainbow layered cake, which certainly is expression. The order below requires Mr. Phillips also to include words and symbols on his cakes. It's that broad. So if, for example, Mr. Phillips had used a Bible verse on a cake in the past, he would be compelled to use that Bible verse in a different context.
Where does it say? I thought
Ginsburg.
that the requirement was he supply a custom-made cake as he would to any other shopper, but that he didn't have to convey somebody else's message. That is, he didn't have to write anything on the cake.
In Petitioner's Appendix 57A, the order is provided, and that order requires him to provide anything that he would provide on a cake in another setting for a marriage between a man and a woman, which includes words and images that he would provide.
Well, suppose we exclude that and say, let's make the assumption that if he makes custom-made cakes for others, he must make it for this pair.
It depends on the temperature and the weather forecast for the day, because if winter snows are being forecasted, but it doesn't actually snow like what just happened here in Atlanta, and they come in with sloppy shoes, must he then be compelled to write on the cake, unless, of course, it has a meringue filling? Will it then be something that he has to do with green frosting? This is why the doctrine, can I call it that, of freedom of speech must be all speech. Otherwise, it will be no speech at all. This is Wretched Radio. Don't forget, if you would like to hear the entire daily broadcast, simply visit wretched.org, go to iTunes, figure out your favorite Android listening platform, and you can listen to the entire program every single day, downloaded to your listening device for free. Well, thanks to our monthly supporters called the Gospel Partners. If you'd like to partner with us, we'd be very, very grateful. Simply visit wretched.org.